So excited to see everybody here today. And today is May the 5th, 2021. Very cool. So let's wait till a few more people come in. It's just so fun to have these conversations. Lisa, thank you for joining us. I know you are there with your mom in midst of hospice, and we surround you with love during this time.
Thank you, Laina. Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Yes. Yes. Jody, if you were in town, we'd have to go out for margaritas. Celebrate Cinco de Mayo. My favorite holiday. Oh, every day is a margarita day. If you want it to be. Okay. So for today's inspiration, and it really is just, it's amazing. I just have to say that I'm still in awe of, I can go to sleep the night before these calls totally, completely at ease and at peace. I don't know what we're going to talk about during the day, sometimes in the shower, sometimes when I'm just doing my meditation, I get what to share. And I'm super excited about this because it's a very simple way to understand what's going on, but it is a very profound way of looking at things that the world is just not used to. And until we get really comfortable with how divine, how absolutely amazing we are, how magnificently grand we are, the simplicity of what the Course in Miracles wants us to understand does not make sense. So it's a paradox. To be able to really get the ease of what this is about, you have to move past what seems to be difficult, and that is acknowledging that we are powerful, eternal creators. And until we accept that we're powerful, eternal creators, the stuff of the world that seems to be so difficult and so out of our control cannot be fully understood, that is actually completely under our control. So when we enter into that place of paradox where we are creating what we don't want, we acknowledge that there's stuff that we don't like, and then we accept that we created it, we actually enter into a beautiful dance where we see that we are the ones that have the power to change what's happening, of all things, with our love and acceptance of exactly what we do not like. Because it is that love that doesn't judge, that transmutes, which had been judged before. And these are things that to me made no sense until they began to make sense. Mm-hmm. And I love to make it as easy as possible for anybody on this journey to really get the simplicity of what we are being invited into. But it's only made difficult because our egoic mind loves to complicate things, and it requires, as those of you who've coached with me so many times, I tell you over and over and over again, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay. Tell yourself it's okay. It's okay that I'm not right about this, so that the ego mind can ease up and enter into the joy of learning something new, which in truth is always a remembering something old that is part of the essence of who we are. So lots of things get involved in what we're doing to awaken. Again, we have to accept what we don't like, because if you don't love it, you can't transmute it. You have to get comfortable being wrong about what you think was right, because it's in the being comfortable with being wrong that you actually allow yourself to know what is true. Because it ceases to be right and wrong, but the mind has to be put at ease. So lots of different things. So let me share with you from the Course what the inspiration is for what we're going to talk about today. And so we're using Course in Miracles. I use the 3rd edition just because it's the latest one, and it has all of the Course in Miracles books in it, because there's several of them. And this section is in chapter 31. in the first part of the book, which is called the text. And chapter 31, which is the final chapter of the text. So we're going to go to today to where the Course wants us to go after we've learned everything the Course wants to teach us. So I'm going to talk about something that is very advanced for a student of truth, but yet those of you who have been studying the Course or anything that leads you to truth, you're going to see that it's the same thing we've been told over and over and over and over again. But the goal is to make it super, super simple. So inside of chapter 31, let me tell you where I am. I am in, this is section number 1, which is called the simplicity of salvation. And salvation in the Course is to spare ourselves of suffering. We save ourselves. Salvation is, there's not somebody coming in to save us. Jesus is not going to come in to save us. Jesus is giving us information through the Course and through many other teachings. Lots of other teachers have given us all kinds of information. But when you understand the simplicity of the truth, then you can really learn how to save yourself. And we're going to go to paragraph number 7. So we're going to start there because we're going to get right to the simplicity of salvation. So the lessons to be learned are only 2. Again, we're going to get super, super simple. And I'm going to read what is in here. And there's about a page and a half-ish, a little bit more than a page and a half. And I'm going to read some of this information, and we're going to break it down so that you can see that all of awakening relies on understanding that there's only 2 things that we need to understand here. We need to learn these two lessons. All right. So the lessons to be learned are only 2. Each has its outcome in a different world. You know, we've talked about this chart, and this is the map of consciousness. There's only 2 possible ways. You're going to descend or you're going to ascend. That's it. You're going to descend into the darkest places that the ego can take you. And when we descend, we literally descend from all that is. We descend into a very small point. That is what the ego, where the ego gets created, is it's a very small idea of who we are. So we literally have to descend in the awareness of who we are. We have to contract ourselves. So there's only 2 ways to learn. That's to contract yourself and have an experience of that, and then expand yourself. That's how you realize how powerful you are, when you put yourself in contraction and in expansion. When you make yourself only human, and then you expand and accept your divinity as well. So as we look at the map of consciousness, only 2 directions. And it's not like it's up or down, it's contraction or expansion. So it doesn't matter which way you look at it. I can invert this and it's the same thing. You're going to go left or you're going to go right. I can angle it. You're going to go one way or you're going to go the other. That is it. The Course wants us to understand that there's only 2 choices always being made. So because each has a very different outcome in the world, and each world follows surely from its source. The certain outcome of the lesson that God's Son is guilty is the world that you see. So the world that we are currently experiencing, with its darkness, with its structures that are falling apart, is the world that our ego has created. It is a world where we have condensed ourselves and believe that we are so small and insignificant. Let me make this easier to see. I'll bring it up a little bit. Where we think that what we are is so small and insignificant, and we operate inside of this tiny idea of who we think we are, which is how we're easily scared. Because when you don't know you're one with all that is, you think you're all alone and by yourself, and that activates an incredible amount of fear that it's you against the world. And what is one of our greatest fear? Fear of being alone. Well, when we understand that you cannot be alone because we're actually all one, we then begin to experience the support of this unseen world. That is what happens to us when we awaken. We actually are operating in alignment with the unseen world for synchronicity. for guidance, for information, because we realize that to believe that you are all alone is to believe with all of the information that's been placed in your mind, which means all learned from the external world, all of it changeable, all of it. If you're not born with the knowledge, you learned it. So this is part of the process that the course takes us through, is sorting out what the world taught us, which can change, because you see adopted children. A Chinese child who grows up with American parents knows American information, but deep in their heart, there's a knowingness of their Chinese roots, and they might want to connect with that. But the information in the mind is information that was placed in their mind. Ooh. Excuse me. I am blessed. So we've got to get really clear that depending on what you believe, you're going to contract and create the world that we see, or you're going to be expanded and you're going to live in a much different world, in the world that God created, which is really a beautiful planet Earth that is filled with abundance, that is absolutely beautiful, filled with divine holy beings, or in the egoic world, which is a world of structure, of form, of systems, of processes, of rulers, and those ruled, of rights and wrongs and all kinds of things that when they go beyond being useful for the purpose of keeping everybody operating safely, like traffic lights without bumping into each other, when they go beyond being useful, they go into being controlling. Once they go into being controlling, then it is not of God, because God created us to be free. We are freedom-seeking beings. We expand through freedom. When our freedoms are taken away, we contract, and that's what is the signal that we are off track, that we're going in the direction that is not going to allow us to experience life, liberty, and happiness, as is our birthright, and our founding fathers understood that. So then in sentence number 5, and for those of you who might have joined recently, I'm in the Course in Miracles in chapter 31 inside of the text. It's called The Final Vision. This is the last chapter in the entire text. And we are in paragraph number 7 inside of section 1. So sentence number 5 says, "It is a world of terror and despair." This is the world that we see, and we experience guilt because of this particular world, the world the ego has created. "It is a world of terror and despair, nor is there hope of happiness in it. There is no plan for safety that you can make that ever will succeed. There is no joy that you can seek for here and hope to find. Yet this is not the only outcome which your learning can produce. However much you may have overlearned your chosen task, the lesson that reflects the love of God is stronger still, and you will learn God's Son is innocent and see another world." So to make this really, really simple, thank you for posting that. Yes, page 646. To make this really simple, there are 2 lessons to be learned. One is the lesson that we are guilty and operate in this world that we are looking at, which appears to be a world of pain and despair. And there is the world that we can only learn through the lesson of innocence. That is the world that God has created, that can only be seen when our eyes have been cleared of the illusion of separation. Our eyes have been cleared of the egoic thought system that we operate under. So we create a world of guilt when we descend into a very small idea of ourselves. We have to go through the layers. We have to remove all of the layers that we pick up. We've got to work our way through those layers, which is to work through these layers of emotional baggage of beliefs that have been created to block us from the truth of who we are. So we descend into a small idea of ourselves and create guilt. Every one of us. The Course is really clear. It's really hard to find this guilt. You have to be very advanced on your journey to find the guilt that the Course is talking about, because it is one of the obstacles to really understanding how magnificent we are. And we will talk about that a little bit here. And those of you who have had an experience of understanding that guilt, this will make a whole lot of sense. If you haven't experienced that guilt, the ego's going to say, I don't have any guilt, but we have to face that guilt. And I'll talk about that guilt in a little bit, so it makes a lot more sense. So there's two directions: into guilt of the ego or into our innocence, which is of God. So in this world of guilt, of density that the ego has created, there's no happiness. In the world of innocence, which is why we have to become like a little child, innocent again, like a little child, is the world of happiness, of joy, of co-creation that works for everybody, because everybody's free to be themselves. So the next paragraph, paragraph number 8. So the outcome of the lesson that God's Son is guiltless is a world in which there is no fear, and everything is lit with hope and sparkles with a gentle friendliness. Nothing but calls to you in soft appeal to be your friend, and let it join with you. And never does a call remain unheard, misunderstood, nor left unanswered in the self-same tongue in which the call was made. So it is a world when we are all operating up here in this space, we are going to be operating in the place of connection with source, of alignment with one another. Everybody's mindset is going to be attuned to the same, maybe not the exact same frequency, because these are all frequencies, but very similar higher frequencies, so that helping one another, so that sharing with one another is an easy thing to do. And Lorelei, we're not on a lesson. Just above your comment is the section in the chapter that we're in. Daisy, thanks for posting that. So then it goes on to say in sentence number 4, and you will understand it was this call that everyone and everything within the world has always made, but you had not perceived it as it was. And now you see that you were mistaken. I'm going to explain this in a second. You had been deceived by forms the call was hidden in, and so you did not hear it and had lost a friend who always wanted to be a part of you. The soft eternal calling of each part of God's creation to the whole is heard throughout the world. This second lesson brings. So these two lessons, one is a lesson to enter into density and experience the process of entering into the realm of guilt. The other one is a call to awaken and come out of the place of guilt and ascend to the truth of who we are. God has given us permission. And when I say that, it's not because God is more important or in a hierarchy above who we are. The Course is really clear that we're equal to God. We're only different in one way. God created us. We didn't create God. Other than that, we are exactly the same in our power, because God has granted to us all power. And the reason that is because each one of us is an expression of God. Each and every one is an aspect of God. I am not all that God is, but what I am is all God. Vern is not all that God is. Lorelei is not the only God here. But each of us is an expression of God. And we're made of only that. What has happened to each and every one of us, and this is where the guilt, we have to understand where the guilt comes from. So in the beginning, not at the beginning of our creation, because we've been always there's no beginning or end to what we are, because what is God is, it just is, always has been, always will be, it is. But what happened to the beginning of our human journey is that we made a decision from before incarnation. We made a decision, we chose to enter into the density. We knew that we would have to contract ourselves. We knew that that's the only way to experience forgetting what we are. It's the only way to not remember that we are the essence of God, that all of us are the essence of God, which is really best defined as love and light. It is the light that is the source, the energy of everything, and it is love because it loves everything that it creates. It's one with it. It cannot not be one with all that is. So we choose to enter into this incarnation. When we enter into the incarnation, something that happens, and we know this, is that in the becoming human, we have to forget that we are divine. And that's what the ego valve is all about. To me, it's a little valve or a doorway. You can look at it as a doorway. We enter through a portal where we decide to be born. Little babies, I just have a brand new grandson, Ryder. He is nothing but perfect bliss. You look at that little precious child, there's nothing but innocence there. Everybody that sees him loves him because it's emanating love and light. It is emanating the most delicious love that could possibly ever be on this planet, which is pure, absolutely pure. His mom and dad, as much as they love him, are trained into the world of density. They are going to train Ryder to little by little ride his way down into the density of the ego mind. He is going to be filled with layers of information about who he is, how the world is, what color he is, what social status he is, what religious or spiritual beliefs he has, what his potentials might be. Even though his parents, I know, are going to tell him, they already know that he can do anything he wants. It won't be long before his mind will be filled with, to be successful, you're going to have to make money to be able to do these things. They cost X. You're going to have a job that makes so much. Little by little, his mind is going to go from infinite possibilities into what he has to do to be able to make it in the world when he's an adult. So his little mind is going to go from love and peace and joy. He's going to have to, little by little, let go of his willingness to be completely free and be willing to enter into the creation of an identity where because he trusts his parents, and they're going to make it sound like everything is natural, that this is what happens. And his parents are going to be neutral with him and not making him wrong, not making him right for a little while. And Ryder's soul has to have the courage to descend into having a personality, taking pride. This is who I am. By the age of 2, he's going to want to do it all by himself because he's going to be demanding that he gets what he wants. He wants his food when he wants it. If he doesn't get it, he's going to get angry. And little by little, he is going to descend into the density of becoming a human. All of us do that. That is one of the important things that the Course in Miracles wants us to understand. By choice, we enter into the perception of separation because it's fun, because we know that we're not going to get lost here. We're not. We will come in and maybe have a miserable experience, but when we have the death experience, we're released back into the truth of who we are, and then we get to come back in again and choose again. This is what the journey of reincarnation is all about. So we choose to come in and play this game of hide and seek. We choose to forget the truth of who we are. And we also choose to have teachers along the way, giving us bits of information, helping us remember the truth of who we are. That's what Ryder's soul has asked me to do before he was even born. I felt his essence ask me to please help him remember that he's a master, so he won't go too far into density. So even while he's inside of the idea that he's a human, he will still have some memory of who he is. So that little boy is not going to get dense in the blue state and descend into even the really dark red places. That's just not going to be his journey, because he's choosing to stay in the bluish green and then return back into the light sooner rather than later. He's got work to do here. Again, when you understand all of this, it makes it so much easier to be able to navigate what's happening in the world today. So we choose to come in, we choose to descend. Here's where the guilt kicks in. Deep down inside, while we are creating suffering for ourselves and others, there is a tiny little memory that we created this. The ego doesn't want us to see that, because then it can descend into, look at how far we can go. Let me share the screen because I want you to see this a lot more clearly. And tell me if you can see that. If you'll shake your head, Kat. Okay, cool. So to be able to descend into the lowest parts of the ego is where we go to the blame game. Everybody who's blaming, this is where their consciousness is, as low as it can get. This is where we get vindictive for the people that we blame. This is what evil is all about. So, and this is where destruction happens. So inside of the blame game, you did this to me. There is a tiny memory of, no, I did this to myself. I'm the one who created this. The ego doesn't want us to accept that we created it, because then it can't blame. But the minute that we accept that we created this suffering, we begin to move up. We begin to literally look at the guilt, begin to abdicate the guilt, begin to move through the grief of the regret of having gone so low. We have to face our fears, because when we're willing to do this work, we're going to have to look at how many disappointments we've had, how we've enslaved ourselves, how we've experienced worry. We're going to go through a process of self-hate when we are awakening, that is going to cause us to demand that we reconnect with our sense of pride about our soul, so we can have the courage to affirm the truth of who we are and begin the process of ascension. So we have, the guilt is down at the very bottom, just above blame. So the minute we stop blaming, the outside made me do this, or the outside made me unhappy, or the outside makes me angry, we begin the process of ascension to have the courage to affirm that we are powerful creators. Without the acceptance that we are powerful creators, we cannot begin the process of expansion and accepting that power, so that with that power, we can redirect it. So let me just stop here before I read a little bit more. Does this make sense? Does this conjure up questions, comments? Please unmute yourself and let me know if this is making sense.
Hey, this is Jody.
Hey.
Hello. Hey, quick question. The guilt. Can you clarify? Because it's the only thing that I'm not completely getting or feeling. The guilt that we chose this, and where does that live, and how does that show up?
So it's it's really, it's simple to understand. If you can go to, as a parent, do you have any guilt for the ways that you've raised your daughter?
Yes.
Okay. So that guilt stems from the ego, the acknowledgement that you could have done better. Is that correct?
Yes.
And every parent has this. Every single one of us has that. So that little bit of guilt that you could have done a better job with your daughter is the same kind of guilt that begins to activate when you begin to realize, oh, I really could have acknowledged my divinity. I could have acknowledged my power sooner. I could have done it differently if I'd have known differently. So tell me if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Okay.
So it's an awareness that you could have chosen another path, but chose the one that you did because it's all you had at the moment. So that guilt is always, always, always covered up by blaming others. And when we stop blaming others, we can go, okay, well, maybe my mom is not the one who ruined my whole life, or my dad leaving. Maybe if I look at it differently, then how can I change that? And when I realized that I could have looked at my childhood differently, instead of blaming my dad for all of the misery in our family, which is what my mom taught me, my grandmother taught me to do, instead of blaming my dad, I realized, oh my gosh, I really didn't have to agree with mom and dad. I could have created my own perception. But I was a child. And I was being, my mind was a funnel for external information. So I picked up what everybody else said about dad. Deep down inside, I wanted a connection with my dad. Deep down inside, I love my dad. But everybody else's hate of dad, I chose that path. So I descended into blaming dad along with everybody else. When I began to realize I could have done things differently, which is the only way that you can have guilt about how we treat our children, then I began to realize, well, if I could have looked at it differently, how could I have seen them? I would have had to see my dad from his innocence and not his guilt. I would have had to look at my dad as, why did he leave? What possibly made him happier leaving than being with us? And it wasn't until I began to see his innocence, not judge him as my mother and grandmother judged him, but begin to, with innocent eyes, look at my dad's, why he made the choices that he made. Then I began to activate compassion. So I carried guilt for a while because I was like, oh my gosh, if I could have done this sooner, I would have done this sooner. So that awareness is important, because as we continue to ascend, we're going to use that awareness of that guilt to do what the Course says is forgiveness. We forgive ourselves and others for having done the best that we could with what we had at the time, because we entered to forget our power to choose only love. We entered to play the game of choosing fear. Tell me, Jody, if that makes sense all the way through.
It makes perfect sense, except for the part where I came in to choose fear. So did I come in to forget?
We come in to play the human game. So if you are non-physical energy, you couldn't come in and give birth to a child. You couldn't come in and have a body. You just absolutely could not have the human experience. So when we begin to ascend and focus on the good, the beauty of the human experience, the amazingness of having a body, the amazingness of having senses to touch and taste and smell, once we begin to see that there is beauty all around, we begin to then realize that the human journey is an amazing journey. But when we're operating with the pain of the past, it's hard to see the amazingness of being human. But we chose to come in and be humans. We just got trained into the dark side of humanity. Now we are choosing to understand, how can we do humanity, but from the light side. If you don't accept that you chose to be a human, you cannot know that you are the creative source of all that is. You cannot enter into alignment with God in you, because then there's still I didn't choose it, which means somebody else did this to me, which takes us back to blame. They put me here to suffer. So until there's that choice, that acknowledgement, yeah, from the infinite source, I chose to have this finite experience. You cannot reverse what's happening to you, because from blame, you're too low on the scale of emotions. There's too much work to undo. And it takes a while to recognize that we chose this experience. It really, to talk it and walk it takes a while, because when you walk it, there's absolutely nothing that has power over you. Now you are the one who is choosing to bring your ascended self, the light, to every circumstance. But until that choice is acknowledged, that I chose to go dark, you cannot possibly know how powerful you are. So, and we're all in different stages. So if this makes sense, in this level, accept that. But there's continuations of expansion as we move up the map of consciousness. Does that make sense, Jody?
Oh yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments? Please share. No? Okay. Well, then let's keep reading. So we'll go to paragraph number 9. So there is no living thing that does not share the universal will that it be whole, and that you do not leave its call unheard. All of us have the call of source inside of us, because all of us are source, wanting to return to the truth of who we are. It's kind of like bungee jumping. We took a bungee jump. We jumped off the bridge from, universal consciousness, non-physicality. We jumped into physicality. When we did that, we're still tethered to the bungee cord. It wants to pull us back, but as long as we're grasping and holding on to the stuff down here and thinking this is what is real, we can't return. So we're keeping ourselves from returning by believing that what is real is the physical world, that is, the world of form, the world of changing things that is breaking down, because we didn't let go of the world of form by choice. It is having to break apart so that we will, that bungee cord now can do its job and pull us back. That's where humanity is right now. All the things that we have grasped onto as our reality in physical form are all temporary. They're breaking down because we deserve a lot more. And if we don't acknowledge that we deserve more, well, guess what? That bungee cord is pulling us back. We are going to, at some point, have to wake up and realize that we deserve more. That deserving more is to a human very uncomfortable, because it's a letting go of solidity, what appeared to be solid, letting go of what little we settled for. When you descend into thinking this is all you are, we settle for very little. We settle for the one house, the one partner, the one job, the one amount of money, the few little things that we do that let us feel like we're free, our one little pub, our favorite restaurant, the favorite cereal at the grocery store. We have settled for very, very little. And we are being called to expand our awareness of infinite possibilities that are there for us to experience. That's why a lot of young people today, they don't want to settle in a house somewhere. They don't want to take a mortgage. They want to live in a tiny house on wheels where they can move about, or do Airbnb, couch surf, whatever. They want to travel the world. They don't want to stay in one tiny little place, because they didn't descend as low as we did into wanting to settle down and do what everybody taught us. They're seeing what everybody taught us going, that's not working for you, mom and dad. Look how angry and depressed and miserable you are. Look how things are not working for you. You're all scared that you lost your money in the stock market. You're all scared because you got fired. You're all scared because you're going to, catch a virus or something. I don't want that life. Don't pull me down into the density of settling for so little. I'm going to stay up here and have more options. Of course, all the humans down here think that that's irresponsible and immature, blah, blah, blah. And they're up here going, no, you're the one irresponsible, because you're the one who created your self-worth from your net worth. That's irresponsible. You would have been happier if you were not attached to those things. So we're having a tug of war between those masters that have come to the planet to show us another way, by being the teenagers that don't want to move down into density. They want to do things their own way. So let me keep reading. All right, so we have that call inside of us. That bungee cord is pulling us back. It's easier if we let go. But if we don't let go of the things that we hold as real, they're going to get yanked, because there's more waiting for us, and the universal will is calling. So without your answer, it is left to die, as it is saved from death when you have heard its calling as an ancient call to life, and understood that it is but your own. Bottom line, when we don't listen that we are eternal, we listen to the call of death. We believe that death is real. Like, for example, sweet little, our dear friend Lisa, she's going through the time right now where her mother is in hospice. So there's that experience, and I get to have lots of conversations with her. So there's that experience that there's a body that is going to be transitioning, but Lisa's consciousness understands that there is so much more to mom as an unseen being than just as a physical being. When my mom died, I only knew this. So I suffered greatly when the body was gone. Had I had the consciousness that Lisa has, I could have then been present to a transition back into non-physicality. So that's what this is wanting us to know, is that there is a call to remember our eternal life, so that we don't get stuck in the suffering of believing in death. And death is what the ego wants us to believe is real and final, so that we can suffer some more by going to hell afterwards. The ego doesn't let us not suffer. We're going to suffer through the death process, and then we're going to suffer after death, because that's what they've taught us. It gets worse after death, like death wasn't bad enough. So sentence number 3 in paragraph 9 says, the Christ in you remembers God with all the certainty with which he knows his love. The Christed consciousness is the knowingness inside of us that is awakening. It is the recognition that just like Jesus, just like Buddha, just like Lao Tzu, just like Confucius, there is a remembering of the godlike essence that is inside of us. It is God's will to enter into physicality to bring love and light. But we chose to forget we were God, just put that egoic potential in there to have the human experience. We have just gotten lost in the human experience and we've taken it too far. We have just done humanity to the worst possible potential that is possible as creators, but it is not what God is. So we are being called back into the light. So that bungee cord only lets you go so far. This is it. We have gone as far as we go. Now it's time to return to the light. So you return to the light by one of two ways. You begin to, the Christ in you begins to awaken. You begin to remember the truth of who you are, like it is for so many of these young people at a young age, or you have to go through the suffering of losing what you think makes you real, all the physical stuff that has to go, the body, the health, the wealth, the love of your life, all those things have to go away, because either you remember the truth of who you are, or you will go into total complete chaos when who you think you are gets taken away. So there's two ways of returning to truth: by accepting that it is yours, or by it having be thrust upon you through the loss of what you thought is who you are. That's it. One way is the way of suffering. One way is the way of ease into the remembering of the truth of who we are. Then he goes on to say that our ability to remember that God is inside of us, but only if his son, you and I, are innocent, can we remember the love that we are. I'm going to explain that in a second. Let me just finish this paragraph. For God were fear indeed if he whom he created innocent could be a slave to guilt. God's perfect son remembers his creation, but in guilt he has forgotten what he really is. So the creative source, in its infinite power, has given each and every one of us free will to choose to have a human experience, knowing that we would get all the messengers. They've been coming for thousands of years. We have chosen not to believe the messengers because we allowed those who have been on the planet for a lot longer, who got really dark and went down into the density of evil, to tell us what is truth. And we have been believing those who are telling us things that are not true. We are the ones who have to now decide what's true. What's true? Is love true?
Hey, Marguerite, this
Fear
is
true?
John.
There we go. Is love true or is fear true? Am I non-physical or am I just physical? When you can sit with this, the really curiosity, which is, you've got to have the courage to go neutral. Instead of this is the right way and that's the wrong way, you've got to go neutral and begin to trust, well, what if both were possible? What if our humanity amidst the fears could be infused with love? What if our humanity could be infused with divinity? What if the non-physical is, or the physical is actually infused with non-physical? We have to move to a place of holding two what appear to be opposites and begin to let them work together, which is exactly what those who are in control don't want us to know. Because when we know that we are grand, why would we buy into fear? When you know that you are infinite, why would you settle for so little? And that's only because the mind has been indoctrinated through education, through religion, through the medical establishment, through the government systems, to abdicate our power. So there's going to be a little bit of guilt, well, maybe a lot of guilt, in realizing we abdicated our power, which is why it is so difficult for people today to admit that maybe they made a mistake, because they don't want to feel the guilt of having made a mistake that's going to cost them. And what God wants us to understand, what Jesus is laying out in A Course in Miracles is, if you go back to innocence, if you go back to, you know what? I came in as an innocent child, and all that suffering is because I learned it. What if I stop learning what the world taught me? I'm still that innocent child. Just as my dad, he made a choice to leave my mom, not because he hated us, but because he wanted to feel happiness that he wasn't thinking he could have with my mom anymore. So when I began to see my dad as an innocent being, just like me, a holy child who wanted to have happiness in his life, and he went on to pursue happiness in his life, why would I block myself from feeling love for him and from him simply by making a judgment that he's an evil person for having left us? So I had to get my mind to hold two things. Yes, he left us, but he just wanted to be happy. So when I could see him as just like me, a being of love and light, and it just wasn't with my mom anymore. Later on in my life, as I began to study more about spirituality, and after my dad passed, oh, I have the book here in my bookcase somewhere. After my dad passed, and I went through his things that he left for me. One of the things besides his Bible that he had left for me was one of his favorite books, and it was by Wayne Dyer. And when I began to open that book, I began to read all the notes. So those of you who know me, that I mark my books like crazy, I got it from my father. In his book, my dad wrote so many notes about if only he had known. You know, he felt so horrible for the suffering and the sadness that he caused to others. He was going through his own forgiveness journey because, just like me, he got a divorce. Just like me, I had to forgive myself for going through a divorce and begin to acknowledge that my children are powerful creators, and they didn't have to descend into hating their mom or dad for our choices. They could stay up here and forgive us for doing the things that we did and not take it personally. So when we can begin to activate the truth of our innocence, we really are innocent, playful beings that chose to come into this planet and play the game of hide and seek. Yes, it has consequences. It affects relationships. It creates all kinds of chaos in the world when we become so selfishly oriented. It's all about me. So my mom, in her selfishness, it was all about her. Oh, you left me. Now I'm going to blame you. And I'm going to make my daughters turn on you, because I'm going to make sure everybody knows what a horrible person you are. My mom never said to me, you know what? Maybe I wasn't the best wife. Maybe I wasn't a good friend to him. Maybe I wasn't a good partner. Maybe I was a bitch all the time. So I had to remove what my mom wanted me to believe about my dad so that I could have my own experience about dad and then be able to see the two of them clearly. That's because I was having clarity about who I am. I was realizing I can choose love or fear. I can choose to be selfish and greedy, or I can choose to be compassionate and caring. And when you have the recognition that you can choose both, why would you choose suffering? Why would you choose density? Why would you choose fear? You won't. With consciousness, you won't do that. With awareness, you won't do that. But you can't come here to know you won't do that until you see that you did do it. So it's a paradox. I chose this, so I've got to choose not doing that anymore. And that is what returns us to being the bringers of love and light again. So there is guilt that comes up from going, damn, I've had all of this superpower my whole life and nobody told me about it. Well, that's exactly why my grandson wants me to remind him of his superpowers, so that as he is being conditioned into believing that he's, just a human, and my daughter and son-in-law are going to do a really good job of reminding him he's more than that. But I know because I understand more of this process is what I teach. I will be able to help him see things a lot more clearly, so that his guilt will either be non-existent or be so minimal. Because from the moment that I can start talking to him, that's the vision that I'm holding him in. Powerful. And reminding him he constantly has two choices, not telling him what he should choose, which is what I did as a parent. I'm going to ask him to start choosing from the moment that he can begin to start making some choices. And it won't take long. It won't take long. So let me go to the next paragraph, number 10. So the fear of God results as surely from the lesson that his son is guilty as God's love must be remembered when he learns his innocence. Two lessons. I'm guilty, descend into the world of the ego and fear. I'm innocent, ascend to the world of God, love and light. And forgiveness. This, you got to go through forgiveness right there. And you have to have forgiveness. You cannot ascend without forgiveness, and you cannot release guilt until you forgive yourself for having used your superpowers in the only way you knew how, to blame others, to expect others to do for you, to give you what is already inside of you. That's what the Course really wants us to understand. That's why we're looking at paragraph 31. So we're going to the end of the story so that you can have this information in your mind as you continue weaving through your own life experiences. So sentence number 2 says, for hate must father fear and look upon its father as itself. Yes, when we hate that my dad did that to me, I was so afraid of my dad ever hurting me again. Guess what I did? In my ignorance, in my arrogance, Dad, you hurt me once, I'm not going to let you hurt me again. I was so afraid to let him get close to me. I didn't want to go visit him. I did not want to be around him because all I kept hearing in the programming was he abandons people. He abandons the family. He abandons children. Well, I didn't want to be abandoned by him again. So I would not let myself have a relationship with this man that I so desperately wanted. Why? Because of the bungee cord. That's my father, just like God is our father. We are connected. We are designed to be in love and oneness. So my soul wanted a connection with my human father, but I wouldn't let myself have that connection because I feared he would hurt me again. And mind you, he never hurt me. I just believed stories in my head that caused me to believe he could. And in that believing that he could hurt me, I activated this fear, not only that my father could hurt me, but guess what happened? My mind got trained with fathers do this, husbands do this. So I always operated until I finally got my mindset straight. A lot of healing work, a lot of forgiveness work, to let go, believing that every man that enters my life is going to hurt me and leave me and abandon me, which of course, to not be abandoned, guess what I did? I would abandon them first. So why? Because I was taught to blame. It was never my fault. It was always their fault. So that blame is in there, covering up our ability to see the guilt that we hold for having blamed others when we could have seen it differently. But we didn't know what we didn't know then. That's why this forgiveness of the Course in Miracles is radical, because it says forgive. Forgiveness from the Course in Miracles is we're forgiving what never changed us. It never changed the soul that I am. What my dad did not alter my soul. It just placed a veil in front of my eyes, a veil made up of other people's beliefs. So I had to forgive myself for having created that distance. But in forgiving my dad, I forgive him for what he never did to me. He never hurt me because my soul cannot be hurt. My soul is eternal and pure love. I just needed to remove the veil and let my love flow to him. That's when the repairing of the relationship began, but it was just a couple of years before he passed. About 38 years of my life, I kept that distance from my father, and I am the one who created it because of misinformation in my mind. So I feared my dad because I got trained into believing that it was okay to hate him. So how wrong are you who fails to hear the call that echoes past each seeming call to death, that sings behind each murderous attack and pleads that love restore the dying world? You do not understand who calls to you beyond each form of hate, each call to war. Yet you will recognize him as you give him answer in the language that he calls. I'll explain this in a second. He will appear when you have answered him, and you will know in him that God is love. So all along, that bungee cord calling me back into relationship with my dad. There was probably not a day that went by as a child. It wasn't so intense when I got to be a teenager and then got older and married and so on and so forth. But as a child, not a day went by that I didn't long for my dad. Not a day went by that I didn't want to have that connection with him. But my mind would override any desire to write him, to call him, to talk to him when he called. My mind would override that desire because I had it in my head that he was the source of my suffering, not knowing that I only suffered because I blamed him. I would not have suffered if I would have been my innocent childlike self and just, oh, daddy's calling. Yeah, let me talk to you. Daddy, I miss you. I wouldn't do that because I was listening to the voice of my ego, of righteousness, again, programmed by my mom and grandmother. But I am the one who am in control of my mind. At 10, I could have chosen to say, Dad, I miss you. But instead, nope, I'm not going to give him that satisfaction. So guess one of my qualities, stubbornness. I had to work through a lot of stubbornness because when I got indoctrinated by my mother into believing that you need to protect yourself because this is her talking, I can't count on a man. Well, guess what I thought? Well, I can't count on a man either. I can't count on anybody either. So I'm going to have to protect myself. Even as a young child, you're creating those protective mechanisms, and they filter everything you perceive in the world. And it requires an incredible amount of courage to realize that we all carry guilt for all the suffering we created for ourselves. Nobody has control over what we think. They influence our thinking with their beliefs, but we don't have to believe what they say. How many times didn't your parents or aunts, uncles, somebody tell you something that you were like, I'm not going to believe that? How many times did somebody indoctrinate you in that you had to brush your teeth every morning and you said, no, I don't feel like it today? So we have the ability to not believe what others tell us we're supposed to do. So we have to acknowledge the course is really clear. We are always choosing what we think. We're always choosing what we believe. Have we been believing things that are not true? Yes, because look at what's true that's been left out. Every time we're indoctrinated into the world's beliefs, we have to leave a lot of the truth out of it. We're not taught what's non-physically truth about us. We're only taught a very small amount because you can't control people who know the truth. You can only control them when they have a little bit of information. A little bit of information. Oh yeah, we're the children of God. Oh, but God's out there in the cloud somewhere, and if you're not good, then they're going to send you to hell. Okay, so you know truth. We're part of God. God created us, but you don't know the real truth that God is only a God of love. So the mind is fed so much misinformation. And this journey of ascension is to sort through it and choose to hold on to only what is true and let go of what is not. How do you know what's true? It will feel peaceful. How do you know what's not true? It's everything you resist. Resistance is always to what is not true. And we will resist, or let me say it the other way. Resistance is always to what is true. Every single time we go into resistance, nope, don't want that, is because there could possibly be something there that could help expand us. We only resist leaving the comfort zone of what little bit we know. Once you're beyond what the world teaches you, what is there to resist? You're free. You're free. You're free to think and believe whatever you want to believe. And that's the freedom that God wants us to experience while we're in physical form so that we can free the rest of the world from our bondage of blaming and shaming them and lying and all of this crazy stuff that creates the barriers to the awareness that what we are is bringers of love and light. For a while, we are going to be pointing out at all those evil people that did this to us until we decide, you know what? They didn't do it to us. We played this game. We are in this dance. Let me forgive Biden. Let me forgive Kamala. Let me forgive Hitler. Let me forgive all these people that I believe are the sources of all the troubles in the world. Because when I forgive them, I realize they got indoctrinated like the rest of us. They just went further down into the darkness. From my higher perspective, I can be willing to be optimistic and hope that they too will find that bungee cord is calling them back. And guess what's coming to these people? Many of them are going to have to face the horrendous ways in which they have lied and cheated to humanity, the incredible amount of suffering that because of their choices have been perpetrated on humanity, and that humanity that experienced that suffering, they will not move past their suffering and find their divinity if they stay in the space of, yeah, see, this is what you did to me. We all have to. This is what Ascension is all about. Recognize that we are intertwined in a game, that we need to unravel this story, that we need to untether ourselves from this game. And those who are going to want to choose to continue in darkness, they can, because it's a choice. And those who want to go into the light, we can, because it's a choice. And that's where we are right now, is this very clear bifurcation of what's happening, where we can choose love or fear. And when we begin to choose love, we can't be hating on these people. We've got to love them for playing the roles that they're playing, that are allowing humanity to have the experience that they're having, because it will lead them to the consequences that will show them their lessons. If my mom and dad didn't go through what they went through in their divorce, I never would have had the consequence that led me to one of the most liberating lessons of my life. And that was that I have the ability to decide if I'm going to be loving or if I'm going to be fearful. How else would I have gotten that lesson if they didn't play that scene for me? And I needed to have that to remember my truth, so that I could then choose to do things differently. So when I went through my divorce with Philip, my kid's dad, I said to Philip, I said, we're not going to be pointing fingers. There's no blame here. We're going to go to the kids together and talk about why we're getting divorced. It has nothing to do with them. Nobody's going to get judged or blamed at all. And my children were so grateful that we never blamed the other for our divorce. We allowed everybody to have their own relationship with dad and mom, however it was before, it continued after that, because I learned that lesson from my mom and dad. So how is humanity going to create a new earth? We have to learn the lessons of the old earth that we don't want. So those who are playing the roles of what we don't want are helping those of us who are going to shift to a new paradigm, to shift with the awareness of what we don't want, but without blaming those who showed us why we don't want it. That's the ultimate compassion, the ultimate forgiveness that the Course is inviting us into. We can say no to this without blaming it, but rather seeing it for what it is from a neutral perspective. You know what? I don't like that game anymore. How many of us stop eating something that we don't like and just sit there and blame it and create this scene and post on Facebook? Oh my God, I hate that macaroni and cheese. It was the worst macaroni I've ever had. We don't do that. Neutrally, no, I'm not going to buy it anymore. Neutrally, I'm not buying into this nonsense of government having power over me. No, I'm not buying into that. I don't have to. But I'm not going to give it my power by blaming it, because then I'm going to feel guilty for having blocked my ability to feel the love and the joy that I really am. All right. I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts around that? Because this is really radical. This is radical because we have to learn how to say no. And much to what Vern said last week with discernment, not blame. Discernment frees us to see it for what it is, not engage in losing our energy, because you lose a lot of energy when you're blaming and fearing, but rather harness your energy so that you can hear the guidance that has us do what we need to do to be the bringers of the new earth. And the new earth is not going to be brought here by people sitting around and meditating. Some will do that. Some are going to be active in government. Some are going to be active in taking up arms. Some are going to be active in the medical world. Those brave, courageous pioneers are affirming a new way in different fields, and as doctors and attorneys and generals and presidents, affirming something new. But we can't affirm the new if we don't have the love of God in our hearts. This is why, for me, some of my heroes right now are very clear that they trust God, are very clear that they're doing what they're doing for the greater good of all. And to me, that's absolutely beautiful. I've never seen so many people speaking in such a beautiful way about God. Not about hell and brimstone and fire is going to rain on you people, but rather I'm being guided by God to create something new, which is absolutely beautiful to me. Remarkable. All right, please share. What are your thoughts about what we just talked about here? These beautiful teachings from the Course. Beautiful to me.
I'll share, Laina.
Yes, Ms. Lorelei.
On a few levels. Number one, isn't it great to be a grandparent and be able to do things a bit differently? And it shows us that evolution works. The second thing is I really appreciate what you said about your dad, because I had a very similar experience and withheld from my father out of anger and all kinds of stuff. We did heal before he died through radical forgiveness, thank you, God. But I just really appreciate, especially under the energy today, Moon in Pisces, which is about forgiveness. I really appreciate what you shared because it really resonated with me and it just brought me to a deeper level of forgiveness. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. Well, this is why we have to share how we come to free ourselves with one another, because we give nuggets, we give ideas. Just as we got layers coming down, we help remove those layers when we say how we remove those layers and share that with one another. So thank you, Lorelei.
Welcome.
Nobody else wants to share? We'll keep going. There's a lot more.
Laina?
Yes.
Yeah,
Hey,
it's
Vern.
Vern. Look, I apologize. I'm jumping in and out here. I've got a situation going on at the house here that I've got to
No
take
worries.
care of. I don't want to just make statements without knowing what the content is. So I'm going to be on a listing mode, but everything I've heard so far, I'm totally aligned with, and I appreciate it.
Of
I just want to
course.
let you know what's going on.
No worries. Thank you.
I'll try to
Hope-
stay in as much as I can. All
Hope
right.
it's all okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Well, then let me just keep going and keep sharing more from what's in the Course. So paragraph 11. What is temptation but a wish to make the wrong decision on what you would learn and have an outcome that you do not want? We right now have all kinds of temptations trying to tempt us into blaming, trying to tempt us into hating. There is so much temptation, and we see it playing out right there in the world through telling us to blame the whites for white supremacy or for what is it called, racism. Now where it used to be all the blacks were the source of the problems, now it's all the whites that are the source of the problem. So the mind gets controlled by those who are attempting to be the only winners here. And the only winners are the ones who want to get everything that they believe has value, which is amassing the riches, the wealth, the control, the companies, all of these temporary things that are going to get yanked right out of their hands, because none of this is sustainable at the rate that they're going. If you think about it, if we had 100 companies when we were at this higher level of consciousness, and then we only had 50 companies that were buying each other out, because greed does that. I need to own you. In collaboration and co-creation, you don't need to own somebody. You can work together. But then we had 50 companies, then we had 25 companies. Let's say now 10 companies rule the world. Well, guess what's going to happen if they keep going at this? They're going to eat each other up, so that there's going to be only one winner, because that's what the ego does. It is so greedy and so selfish that it totally destroys everything in its path to be the one and only winner. It does not play nice. So we have an opportunity here, as this is telling us, to watch for the temptations by Facebook, to put on your Facebook profile that you've taken the jab, and that's a good thing. Because once you are on that's the good, right thing to do, guess what happens to everybody who didn't take it? Those are the bad people. Those are the people who are going to infect grandma. Those are the people who don't care about so-and-so. Those are the bad people. My kid's dad has taken the jab, him and his wife, and they've asked all three of my children, well, what are you going to do? And all three of my children said, no, we're not going to do that. And I wouldn't doubt it. Now I'm making an assumption, so I'll admit that. that somewhere in the back of his mind, he's thinking their mom has influenced them because, I'm the crazy one. And my kids tell me that all the time, their dad and wife think I'm crazy. That's okay. I wear that with a badge of honor. So when Lauren had her baby, her dad said, "Are you going to let unvaccinated people near your son?" And she was like, "Yeah, why not? Absolutely." And it was so striking how she did not let herself be tempted by going into fear and thinking, "Oh, maybe I should not let unvaccinated people." Well, you know what that would have done? Then I would be able to see him because not only am I not, but I'm not going to. I will not consent to that. So we're going to be tempted by a lot of things that you have to take, the jab if you want to see your child, your grandchild, your elderly parents. If you want to go to visit them in the nursing home, you have to take that. What are they doing now? If you want to travel, you're going to have to get this passport, this special ways to be able to get around the world. So the ego is going to throw up as many temptations as possible. Yes, Vern, you want to share?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I
Go
wanted
for
to get this in today, and you're hitting right on it right now. Peachtree City, as of yesterday, it announced, it was on the news. They have cameras all over the city now. And they're monitoring for people wearing with special technology to see if people are wearing masks or not wearing masks, if there's social distancing or not, all throughout the city. In other words, they've got cameras every place. It's all being recorded so that they can go and they can enforce the violations of not wearing a mask where you're supposed to, or not keeping social distancing. This is real. It's happening right now, today. It's the first one in the United States that's actually doing it, but they've got the technology there, which means if you live down there, you are now constantly monitored 24/7, no matter where you go. Go shopping or wherever you're at. They got cameras all over. They got all this recognition stuff to see if you're wearing or not wearing a mask or whatever. This is happening right now, today.
Well, that's the technology that they've been perfecting in China for
Yep.
decades
Yep.
now. And it's what the cell phone, little by little, those cell phones have been created to eventually, that's why it's so important that we understand. We have been systematically brought to the point that we are in now. We didn't just happen to fall here off the turnip truck. There have been groups of people who, in their lowest possible level of consciousness, have been plotting how to bring humanity to under its control. So if you look for things like Agenda 21, you can see that these things for, you can say, decades, in some cases hundreds, if not thousands of years, there have been those who have been very deliberate in the way that they're planning on controlling humanity. We don't need to judge that. If you're going to be ascended, you can't judge it. But what we are called to do is to recognize that that is not what, as sovereign beings who chose to be humans, are choosing how to play the human game anymore. So those who give into the indoctrination, this is what's happening right now in the world. A line is being drawn. A lot of those honorary teenagers did not want to go down because they understood energetically, they can feel oppression. Those of us who broke through that and are coming out of that, we're the ones who are ascending to more possibilities, but we don't have all the possibilities because we're still inside of a limited sense of or ability to access all knowledge while we're in human form. You can't know everything and still remain inside of an idea that you're less than who you are. So there's been a systematic pulling humanity down into that finite little point that we're right there, folks. We're almost right there. We have time to return, or we're going to watch this explode. And most likely it's going to explode in our faces. Why? Because humanity as a whole has the desire, because we hear the call, just as I wanted to be connected to my dad, and I overrode that thought. Humanity as a whole wants to be connected and wants love, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's an innate desire because we're freedom seeking beings. That is at the core of who we are. We cannot not be the Christed consciousness that we are. That is getting louder inside of us, which is why the squeeze is getting tighter, because those who want to control people are realizing that too many of us are not buying into that. Do you know how frustrating it is for Facebook when we are not participating in their mandates? It's driving them insane. And that's okay with me. I don't mind driving them a little bit insane, because my mom drove me insane, so I'm going to drive them insane too. Releasing that insanity. So when we decide to be sovereign, it is very, very scary to those who want to control us. The more people, like governor in Florida saying, nope, we're not going to buy into all of that. The more people in positions of power stand up and have those of us who may not have that level of human power, at this level and not playing that role, that we stand behind them, that we gravitate towards those states, that we participate in the groups that are doing that. If I were in Peachtree City, I would have moved out. That would have been my form of saying, nope, sorry, I'm not going to do this. We have to stand for the sovereign beings that we are as examples of that. But we can't do that and affect change if we are doing it in fear or in blame. We really, truly have to learn how to be sovereign, because we know it in our bones that it is our birthright. Not going out there blaming and judging, but standing firm and speaking truth, because that is how those who want to control are going to know. And here's something that we also have to get really clear. This, in many ways, is a battle. It's a battle between good and evil. It's a battle between dark and light. It's a battle between ego and God. And there's going to be casualties. There are those who already have stood up against the oppressing aspects in humanity and have lost their lives or have been incarcerated or whatever, because that's how they show the rest that they have power. So when we say that we want to really value freedom and value truth, make sure that you have the courage to affirm it. Because if you don't have the courage to affirm it, your fear is going to have you be tempted. This is what we were reading about. What is temptation but a wish to make the wrong decision on what you would learn and have an outcome that you do not want? If you, from fear, choose to not speak up, or from fear speak up and end up in a situation that then that gives you fear because you are marked by Facebook or whatever it might be really clear. There's going to be a lot of temptations to have us believe that fear is real. We have a power that we have access to that will walk with us through anything that happens. And when you realize that this is all a game, the being human is a game from a greater perspective, don't take what's happening as the end of who you are. You are eternal. So that courage comes from knowing that we are eternal and that there is a power greater than we are by ourselves working through us. And when we connect with other like-minded people, we operate as a mighty, mighty power. I'm watching those who are standing very firmly on this platform of sovereignty, connecting, and they are doing amazing things, connecting as a big group. Maybe lots of little groups right now, but there's a voice that is uniting them, even while the big tech wants to divide us all by telling us, so many things that are not true. Let me complete this paragraph here. We can always pick up on this later on. It is a recognition that it is a state of mind unwanted that becomes the means whereby the choice is reassessed. Another outcome seemed to be preferred. So temptation is an opportunity for us to see, are we going to go down into fear and have guilt again? Guilt that I didn't stand in my power, guilt that I didn't walk my talk? Or is there going to be a temptation for me to go into fear and I'm going to have the courage to face it and say, no, I am not going to be afraid because I know I'm eternal. And when we lose our fear of death, something happens. We actually gain our power, our joy for life, our desire to be, the mighty warriors that we are. But we just don't have to do it in a vindictive way. We can do it in a way that says very sternly, I don't want to play the game that way anymore. I'm a sovereign being, and you have no power to make me play the game the way you want me to play it, because I'm equally as powerful as you, and I want to play it in the light. We have to get our voice and let these politicians know, wait a second, you are not the boss of me. To the spouse that is abusive, you're not the boss of me. To the job that you don't enjoy, you're not the boss of me. But to get to that place that we can say, you are not in control of me, we really have to know where our power comes from. And it cannot come from the ego, because the ego is not going to let us stay in that space for very long. We need to know that our power comes from God, that our sovereignty, my sovereignty and my power is equal to any politician. They have no more power over me than I do. I have hired them by voting for them, or those who voted themselves in. I have the power to decide if I want to follow those rules or not. And as a collective, if there are things that we don't like, we can abolish this. So we have got to come together and know our sovereignty and stand firmly. Otherwise, temptation is always of the ego, and it is always because of fear, will always lead to more guilt for not standing up. And that's the place that we are right now in, is an opportunity to look at these fear-based temptations, especially those of us who say we're spiritual. If we're talking it, but not walking it, we're going to have a lot of guilt later on when we realize that we cowered it and we're afraid to stand up and say, I don't agree with that. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying it's not what is correct for me. And humanity is going to have to move to see two total different ways in the world. We've been kind of a little bit enmeshed for a long time, but the bifurcation means that we're going to see distinctly the oppressive cities like Peachtree City and the places where there's liberty and freedom like Florida is doing now. Is it going to be all fun and games in Florida? No, it's going to be a mixture for a little while. Is it going to be all fun and games in Peachtree City when everybody is being, surveyed? No, not for a little while. There's going to be chaos. There's going to be chaos in both places. But the ones who really like the masks that are in Florida, they're going to gravitate to Peachtree City. The ones in Peachtree City who don't want to be surveyed, under surveillance, they're going to go to Florida or other places. Little by little, we're going to see that there's going to be a big split between those who want liberty and are not going to tolerate anything else, and those who, out of fear, because they're tempted into a false sense of safety, are going to succumb to control. And they're going to have to deal the consequences of that control, just as these are going to have to deal the consequences of that fear and take it responsibly. Yes, Vern, you were going to say something.
Yeah, the situation that I'm looking at right now is that I know a lot of people are confused about they're even if they're listening to what you're sharing with us. What do you do? What can you do? What's the right thing to do? Because there is a call to action here. The thing is, what kind of action are you going to take, and where you're going to come from in that action? And if this was happening 5 years ago to me, I'd have a whole different way of looking at what's going on. But where I'm coming from now, I'm going to be acting from my heart and from my connectedness. Even though the outward action might look uncomfortable for many, many people. But I think that what's happening is that I thought we could wait until 2022. I thought we could wait until the midterm elections and we could turn everything around. That's not going to happen. It's going to happen. Something's going to happen within the next 6 to 12 months. I'm absolutely positive. And that's so the timeline has been kind of pushed up a lot. But you're seeing these things coming If you're aware, you see something happening all around you. All you have to be is aware and see the restrictions and the things that are happening, not happening. The communications, again, being shut down in so many different places. But, I've got on Friday, I'm going to be going to probate court, and I'll be there probably for most of the day. And hopefully I walk out the other end of that with my concealed weapons permit. Going to take me a day in court to get a permit.
Mm.
That's how bad it is. And people are waiting up to 7 to 8 months in order to just get the right to go and be heard. So
Yeah.
this is not going to happen someday.
It's
This is happening
now.
right now in the moment.
Yeah.
And that's why I think what's happening is again, this is not either or. We've got to continue doing this work that we're doing here. And then we also need to learn how to effectively be proactive, but coming from the same space that we're studying. That's going to be an interesting, you talk about creativity. Creativity is going to be really in demand, because how do you say no? How do you say no and protect yourself?
Mhm.
That's a big question a lot of people have. And a lot of people are afraid.
Exactly.
And fear is the biggest. I mean, that's what's going on out there. And unfortunately, I've been talking to some people that are in what I would call the wrong kind of fear. They're going to do this and they're going to do that. You try to talk to them and they don't listen to you.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm afraid. So you got three things happening. You got people not going to do nothing. You got to get people that are in total fear, that are going to react to it and come from a fear base that is going to cause even more chaos than what's going on right now. And then you got that, here we go back to that third way again. People that are trying to come from a spiritual, somebody asked me the other day, well, who do you think you are? And I stopped for a second and I got really clear. And I said, well, that's what I said. I'm a spiritual patriot. I'm a spiritual patriot. That's what I am. That's what I'm growing into. And the two of them together will give me my sovereignty.
Mhm.
That got really, really clear for me. So again, I'm just jumping in because of.
No, I appreciate that. But that is what we're being called to right now, to get really clear. Who's our daddy? Is it God or is it the ego? Are we going to listen? There is no other way here. It's either God or the ego. And if we choose the way of the ego, it only has one outcome. If we choose the way of God, it has it has also one outcome, but there is that middle way of, for a little while, we're going to be in a bit of a middle way, which is okay for so many of us to not know exactly what to do, but to know we don't want to do what has been done. It's okay to be a little bit confused, because many are going to be very confused. But the only way out of this mess is to claim our sovereignty, because we have to acknowledge that we as a humanity chose to pretend that we're not the powerful divine beings that we are. And those who liked to be the ones that consider themselves the only powerful ones, who understood what was going on and kept us under the illusion that we're not powerful, deliberately kept us under that illusion, they don't want to give up all their power. And you know what? I have compassion for them. Of course, they don't want to give up all their power, but they're not going to get it from me anymore. They've got their own power, but they're going to have to find it the loving way. They're going to have to find the same God-given power in them that I know is in me. And my choice is to model that for them. So let me read the last bit here in this segment. So again, talking about temptation. So you are deceived if you believe that you want disaster and disunity and pain, which is the way of the ego. Hear not the call for this within yourself, but listen rather to the deeper call beyond it that appeals for peace and joy. And all the world will give you joy and peace. For as you hear, you answer. And behold, your answer is the proof of what you learned. Its outcome is the world that you look upon. So that's the end of paragraph number 11. The Course wants us to understand we're in the world, but we're not of it. We need to begin to deal with the world from a place beyond it, from a place that recognizes we're sovereign beings. Everybody's choosing to play the games that we are. If you, Mr. Politician, are choosing to play the game thinking that you got more power over me, and you believe that, even though I show you the documents that are human documents that say, no, you don't have that power, I do. It's we the people. If you don't follow those documents, which is what's happening right now. There is a human battle taking place to affirm the human documents. That battle is the one that is being fought right now. It's going to get ugly before it gets better. But there's the other larger battle, which is not the human documents, is the knowingness of our God self, all of us. And we, those of us who come to the place of realizing that that's a truth for all of us, are going to do a lot of good by calling people into their goodness, not reminding them of how bad they are. So for me, it's not about pointing out what you did wrong. It's about pointing out that you have the ability to choose another way. You have the ability to do it a totally, completely different way. This is why the Course teaches us to be gentle and patient and compassionate and defenseless. I don't have to defend why I believe what I believe. Just as Jesus didn't defend what he believed, why he believed what he believed. You feel it. When you know that everybody's a powerful creator, then you call everybody into considering their choices. Why would you want to choose to deceive other people? Why would you want to choose to lie, Mr. Politician, when you could just as easily choose to follow our documents? Why would you not follow the documents? Well, then maybe it's time to vote you out until you understand what the Constitution is all about. That's okay. If you need a break, let's give you a break. Let's put you over here in political timeout until you learn what this is all about. You're not playing the game the way we want to play the game. And that's what's happening. People are not playing the game the way it's been designed to be played with our documents. So we're going to have to look at it the way God designed it to be played, which is we're bringers of love and light. And if somebody has forgotten that bungee cord is yanking us back home and is going to destruct all of our attachments so that we see the truth of who we really are. People who can forgive, who can have compassion, who can have kindness, because that is the world that we are going to be co-creating inside of. Clearly, if you're here, that is the world that we are going to be co-creating together. For that world to be manifest in a bigger way, it's already started, but for it manifest in a bigger way, we have to say no to the old ways and be very firm about it without blame, but rather with sovereignty. Why? Because I deserve it. I'm a child of God. And so do you. But if you don't want it, it's okay. But I deserve it, and you can't tell me I can't have it. And that's it for today. That's the story. Sticking to it. Thank you all so much for being here. Please unmute yourselves, and anybody picked up a nugget. Thank you, Lorelei, for sharing yours earlier. Please share any nuggets that you might have picked up, and then let's say goodbye. And I will do our call from Colorado next week, Wednesday. It's the only appointment that I'm keeping of things that I do. Besides, I'm going to have a sweet little chat with a few friends. But anyways, I will do the call next Wednesday because I love this. I don't want to miss this. Miss Cat, it's lovely to see you.
Thank you. I'm going to reach out to you to see if we can have a one-on-one with you, because I do have some questions and the time is up. So
Sure. Text me.
Oh, yeah.
Text me. This is the time. If you think you're spiritual and awake, let's prove it. This is the time. You cannot be spiritual and espouse that you're the creator of your own reality and coward and let the temptation of the egoic fear of not following, the rules scare you into giving up your power, your sovereign power, because there's nothing wrong with that. But the consequence of that, you're going to have to deal with them, and that's called karma. Those of us who don't want to live by karma, we don't want to learn the hard way anymore, which is what karma does. We want to learn another way. We want to learn through joy, through fun, through collaboration. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you, Laina.
Absolutely. And I'll see you in the Telegram chat. And Vern, if you don't have Telegram yet, get Telegram and join us.
I think I signed up for it. I'm not sure how it works yet, so I'll figure it out.
Okay. Well, I'll look for you. Are you listed as
Dr. V probably, or Dr. Vern or something like that. Let me check it out, and I'll definitely get back to you on it.
Okay.
All right.
you all
Telegram goes.
later.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.